Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for what is a first episode of the Arsenal Transfer Show of 2023. Happy New Year to everybody tuning in. I hope you had a fantastic celebration last night. Arsenal provided the goods. Arsenal provided even more than the goods, I think, considering the game we were treated to yesterday. 4 goals and more that we're going to talk about in a little bit, but also it hopefully will be a very, very interesting and fingers crossed successful year for Arsenal Football Club, who have positioned themselves at the start of this year better than they ever have in quite some time to win something quite special. Not tempting fate in any way, shape or form. Good morning, everybody joining us in the chat box. Hope you're doing good and well. Jose, good morning to you, to Harvey, to Stephen, to Temi, Karedi, Harvey, Mohammed, Basher, good morning to you. Mike in Perth, Amira, Melanie, Rancid Pumpkin, Franklin, Manlek. We've got Ian H in the chat box as well. Boise, good morning to you. Amira, Penny Ween, Melanie, Harvey. We've got Mr. SNLO. We've got Vivian. We've got Odirille and plenty more of you guys as well. We also have Rancid Pumpkin joining up as a member. So thank you so much for the continued support of the channel as well. If you'd like to help support the channel and come on the show, we've got a preview show tomorrow ahead of the game against Newcastle in just a couple of days' time on the 3rd of January. Well, we've got our preview show tomorrow, and our members come on the preview shows to look ahead to the next game. So make sure you check out the link in the description, the link tree. It will give you all the information you need to be able to do that. But thank you for tuning in as always. We kick off by telling you about the latest available prize, courtesy of our sponsor, Football Prizes, which you can win a signed Gabriel Magalhaes shirt, signed and framed. You can also win the chance to get a instant win opportunity at a signed Ben White photo montage, as well as £20 worth of Football Prizes site credit to get involved in even more competitions. I can tell you that there are only 40 tickets remaining of the 125 that are available. So there is not long left until Wednesday when this runs out, but there is also not long left for you guys to get hold of a ticket if you haven't done so already. Link in the description. So Arsenal picked up 3 massive points in their win against Brighton yesterday. I was down at the Amex Stadium in what was a much tenser end than it ever needed to be. Even when you're winning by 2, even 3 goals, Arsenal somehow know how to make you feel a little bit anxious as things go on. Now, I'll be doing a dedicated show talking about the game with some guests like we did after the game against West Ham at 5 p.m. UK time today, and we're joined by some regular guests to talk about the game in greater detail. Of course, this is the Arsenal Transfer Show. We're going to be focusing on a lot of the Arsenal transfer side of things, but we're going to do a dedicated look at Arsenal's win over Brighton later on today in its own separate podcast. So don't worry, just set your alarms for 5 p.m. UK time. We'll be getting you plenty of reaction to that and more. So set your alarms and turn that notification bell on, because otherwise you will indeed miss it. Now, Newcastle and Manchester City both drew, which meant that Arsenal, of course, went 7 points clear at the top of the Premier League table yesterday, meaning they went in 7 points clear into 2023. I think that nobody really expected Damari Gray to pull off what I say no one expected. He obviously pulled off a fantastic goal against us not so long ago, last season, in fact. But to see that happen against Manchester City, to cost them a couple of points at home against an Everton team that aren't being expected to do anything this season, was a massive surprise. Newcastle, of course, have been on such a big run and not losing, but it must have felt like a loss, drawing at home to a Leeds side that didn't look amazing against Man City. They offered something, I thought, but I think most of us expected both City and Newcastle to pick up the points. And if you were looking at which was the hardest game on the day, Brighton away certainly would have taken that quite easily. So a big boost to Arsenal. And the only issue now is that Arsenal have the shortest break. We play, of course, Newcastle. Man City wait all the way through until Thursday to play Chelsea. So they've got that big break where we, unfortunately, don't. Now, Edu was shown celebrating last night with his son, chanting, "We love you, Arsenal." He, of course, has got a very busy January ahead now. He, of course, needs to get that barbecue in order to spiritually help him through what will be a defining moment of this season and perhaps this entire year. We know about all the links to all the players, and Edu is obviously the man in charge to get this done. It's great to see Mykhaylo Mudryk, by the way, or Mykhaylo Mudryk, sorry, in the chat box, who is apparently one of our members now. Hello, Mykhaylo. Hope you're doing well. I'm not surprised to see you joining us. Thank you so much. Whoever's done that is a genius. Arsenal remain interested in Yunus Musah, according to the Mail. The American international is, of course, a former Arsenal player, having played at youth level for the club before leaving for Valencia. He went to the World Cup with the United States and started in midfield. Very highly rated player, still young, and of course has that synergy and chemistry with the players existing at Arsenal from his time playing with them. When the US played against England, of course, he was able to reunite with Saka, who he had played with at youth level. Arsenal are considering potentially maybe a potential bid for the player, but are interested in Musah as maybe a midfield reinforcement between now and the end of the January window. AC Milan are said to be following Folarin Balogun, who has had an amazing season for Reims in France, scoring 10 goals so far, making him the joint third highest scorer in Liga, behind Neymar with one more, and Mbappe with the 3 more than the former. Well, I say former, he's not former. Maybe he will be former Arsenal striker if indeed does move on in the summer transfer window. Arsenal, at the moment, still very much seemingly are keeping him out there on loan. Whether or not that changes and Arsenal decide to recall him and have that kind of added firepower between now and the end of the season, we'll have to wait and see. But Milan are said to be looking at potentially coming in for the player in the following summer as they look to replace their aging strikers, Olivier Giroud and, of course, Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Now, Atletico Madrid are lining up Pablo Sarabia to replace Joao Felix. This is according to Matteo, of course, part of Italian football media. And he suggests that Pablo Sarabia is being lined up as the guy that will come in should Joao Felix move on. Arsenal, as we know, are genuinely interested in the Portuguese international. The player is available on a loan deal with a significant loan fee, and Atleti want the clubs to be able to take on the full wage packet, which exceeds well over 200,000 euros a week. Arsenal would have to pay significantly, even if they want to get a player just for 6 months without having any chance even of getting him on a permanent contract in the summer. That said, it still does seem to be a deal that I think a lot of us would certainly be very much open to get that added firepower and security in our forward line and add more goals and more assists and more firepower, as I've said already, to the team with what's left to go. But Atleti seemingly very much lining up a replacement should Joao Felix move on. Pablo Sarabia, of course, has played already in La Liga, Spanish international, formerly of Sevilla, and is now playing with PSG in League 1. And lastly, our headline story of the day, Arsenal are expected to make an early second bid for Mudryk in January. This was reported yesterday by Simon Collins of the Evening Standard, who also highlighted what I'm going to show you in a second, which I know all of you have seen already. It's hardly a surprise that Mudryk, of course, as I say, was watching along to Arsenal's game yesterday and posting to his Instagram of 2 top coaches between De Zerbi and Arteta. Of course, he was formerly coached by De Zerbi. Is it even a surprise when Mykhaylo Mudryk is, of course, now joining us, it seems, in our own TGT live chats, whoever that is? But Arsenal are hopefully going to be very aggressive in this deal. There were further reports suggesting that a meeting would take place between Shakhtar Donetsk's executives on the 9th of January. However, I have a feeling that this might be a slightly misconstrued story around when Shakhtar Donetsk players are meeting up for their preparations for the second half of the season to get back underway. We're still awaiting some clarity on that. But Mudryk posting yesterday, I've never seen a player twerk harder for a club. I don't think the Mudryk is doing right now for Arsenal. It's glorious to see. I'm enjoying every second of it. I know some people aren't the most admiring of these actions. I, for one, find it quite funny. And I look forward to seeing this saga hopefully come to an end soon, but not without a few more fireworks maybe between now and maybe him holding up that Arsenal shirt on the Arsenal website this month. We can keep our fingers crossed and hope that that is what is going to happen. That completes the first half of today's show. We're going to move to the second half, of course, and your comments and questions, theories and queries in the second, right after this. Okay, let's go into the chat box and see what questions we've got being asked in there. Dobie says, you mentioned that Arsenal were linked to McAllister last week on Wednesday. What do you think is a reasonable fee for him, wages and payment to Brighton after today's game? Of course, McAllister didn't play against Arsenal. He was still recovering, it seems, from winning the World Cup, which is fair enough. But he was only bought for, I think, 7 or 8 million only a few years ago, 3.5, maybe 2.5, 3.5 years ago. He has, of course, significantly increased in value for that. Since then, I would be looking at 40 to 50 if I was Brighton to get a player as highly sought after right now after the World Cup performances as McAllister. I think he'd be a great option for Arsenal in midfield and maybe someone that we should indeed be looking at. But yeah, 40 to 50 is probably, Dovey, the right price tag associated with him. Sean says, Tom, is there a December player of the month for the Premier League? I need to see my captain win some silverware. I think there probably will be. There was one for November, despite there being only 2 or 3 games, and there was only 2 games in December as well. So I imagine, yes, there will probably be a December player of the month as well after the 2 matches. Benjamin says, Tom, were mistakes made in the summer? As 40 to 50 million would have secured Mudryk. Instead, we went after Neto and Luiz, who weren't for sale. Now we're paying more for Mudryk and could be priced out. I mean, that's certainly one way of looking at it. I can't turn around to you and say, no, Arsenal didn't make a mistake by not signing Mudryk then. I think, of course, they weren't necessarily as convinced as they are now. And we've seen a significant amount more of Mudryk during these 6 months since the window, or 5 months or so, since the window closed, with the Ukrainian Premier League and the Champions League offering Mudryk a chance to showcase his abilities even more. But you could argue that, yes, it was a slight error that we didn't maybe foresee this and sign him on a much cheaper deal. It was felt as though, and I remember listening to James Nicholas on the Arscast talking about how Brentford had a bid rejected and that maybe a bid of around 40 million euros at the time might have secured Mudryk. Now that, of course, has significantly risen. There is still feeling that Arsenal get a deal done and that Shakhtar will come down on their price, but it's when Arsenal will put that bid in, and if they can, of course, convince Shakhtar to sell the player for a reduced rate at least. Amira says, can we please talk more about our goal difference? Jesus hasn't scored in October, yet we're only 2 goals behind City and their goal machine. We ended last season with just a plus 13 goal difference. Now, having a quick look at the Premier League table, which is never a thing I would ever discourage anybody from doing. Arsenal's goal difference currently 26, Manchester City's 28. Arsenal scored 40 goals this season to Manchester City's 44 and have conceded 2 goals left than their title challenging opponents. Arsenal really have seen the goals spread throughout the team this season. As we know, Odegaard went clear. Did he go clear? No, I don't think he went clear. I think he's now joined with Saka still on 7 goals this season. Martinelli getting his 6th goal of the season as well, I believe, yesterday in the win over Brighton. And obviously, we also saw another goal for Eddie Nketiah getting on the score sheet. His record from starts, like when he starts games, especially in the Premier League, is very, very good indeed. Like despite all of our doubts, 7 goals still is Martinelli on. So you've got, I think, all 3 of them are on 7 goals for the season, unless I'm missing a goal out for Saka and for Odegaard, who could be. No, they are indeed on 7. So because of that, you've got 3 players that have scored 21 goals between them. And I know that's the same amount of goals that Erling Haaland has scored so far this campaign. You can't have everything. But I think that you've got players scoring goals throughout the side, and we've still got Jesus, who's got 5 himself. Gabriel scores goals. Xhaka has scored goals, although gone a bit quieter so far. I know Eddie's coming into the team and scoring goals too. What more could you ask for? Matt says, Tom, the Odegaard assist was fire. Yes, it was. I actually had the opportunity to speak to Martin Odegaard after the game. The interview between me and him will be going out a little bit later on this evening. But he was in very high spirits and was naturally buzzing. So I look forward to sharing my conversation with him with you later on tonight. Aditya says, Happy New Year, Tom. Do you think Arteta needs to up his substitution game, or is he fine? I think what we need to up at it, is the options that we have on the bench. That really has limited us. I think if we had, Jesus sitting on the bench, or if we had Smith Rowe on the bench, or if we had a signing like Mudryk on the bench, I think we would have used more of them. I think that was the perfect game to see what Mudryk would have been able to do. You think about the goal that Martinelli scored, a fully fit Mudryk, of course, running in behind to that pass from Ødegaard when Brighton is really kind of pressing and throwing the kitchen sink at us to try and get a goal, and there's a lot more space in behind. You have a fit Mudryk to come off the bench. That's a scary prospect for Arsenal to be able to have in their Arsenal, no pun intended, in behind. So I think it's more to do with the quality on the bench. Arteta's substitutions have always been a bit in focus. I think it was fine to take off the players that we did. Of course, things did change dramatically when we brought on Tomiyasu and Tierney. Thankfully, we managed to weather that. And they should be better. Tomiyasu and Tierney should do better than they did. I wouldn't necessarily put that down to Arteta. But had we have dropped points in this game, we definitely would have been looking at those two. What you have to remember is that we've got Newcastle in 2 days' time now, and we had to rest two of the most athletic positions in our fullback roles. We had to give them an opportunity to rest. We had to protect Zinchenko in particular. And, White is very important to what we do. But we definitely did lack some defensive security at the end of the game. And I'm glad he brought Holding on. Maybe he could have brought him on a little bit earlier. But I was glad that he brought Holding on in the end to kind of secure things at the back. And I was happy. By the way, I don't know if it came up on the TV, but I could tell from where I was sitting in the Amex Stadium, which was right at the back of the side behind the dugouts. It was actually a really good position to watch the game from a tactical standpoint. Arteta was going crazy on the sidelines when Arsenal were trying to make the Rob Holding substitution, because Anthony Taylor, who, by the way, had one of the worst, not just for Arsenal, for Brighton as well, one of the worst refereeing performances I've seen in a long, long time. Anthony Taylor, and I've seen some pretty bad ones. And we've watched the World Cup with some really bad ones. So maybe I'm overestimating how long it's been since I've seen a bad refereeing display. But I thought Anthony Taylor was horrific. Really poor. I think he lost control of the game at one point. I think he gave yellow cards for silly reasons. There was a moment where Eddie Nketiah did something that Gabriel Jesus does a lot on dunk, I think it was. Ramsdale pumped the ball up the end of the other end of the field, and Nketiah bumps into dunk, barely, hardly even touches him really, but puts him off balance and outstrengths dunk, which is no mean feat. And then he's through on goal because the ball bounces away from the defender, and Nketiah's not really got anyone around him. And for some reason, Anthony Taylor blew up as a foul. And then 30 seconds later, Nketiah was then fouled, and it wasn't given. And it was more of a foul than what he'd done on dunk. So, yeah, it was a terrible performance from Anthony Taylor, I thought. One of the worst, as I say, refereeing performances I've seen. But that ultimately didn't matter. And that is what we need. We need to make sure that we take these games out of the hands of the referees and win them on our own accord. And we, of course, managed to do that. Machiavelli says, do you think City and Newcastle dropping points at home and us winning away shows how far this team has gone? The amount of times that we have obviously seen our rivals drop points and we've not managed to take advantage of that is so many. I've lost count of the amount of times we've done that, where Chelsea or Spurs or Man United drop points and we're, of course, vying with them. Where they've dropped points and we've not managed to do what we needed to do to get the points. So it was great to see that. It does show progression. It does show what's changing at this club. It does show how we are better as a team, and I can't wait to see that continue to improve. Temi, is Ødegaard's pass to Martinelli the assist of the season? Without a doubt. I love Joao Moutinho's assist for Podence the other day for Wolves, the little outside of the boot chip over the defence. I love that. But Ødegaard's pass is just... In the stadium, I was crying out for Martinelli to square the ball to Saka. I was desperate for him to pass it to Saka because I thought he's not in a position to score. And I'm very thankful that he didn't in the end and that he did score, because, of course, if he had have squared it, Ødegaard's pass wouldn't go down as an assist this season. And it absolutely deserved to go down as something of a goal contribution. Now, looking at, actually, I haven't managed to check up on Ødegaard's statistics as a whole. And I think that this season he's now got, 5 assists and 7 goals. He's got 12 goal contributions in 15 Premier League games. He was challenged to get double digits for goals really this season. And I said that was a big ask because, even Bernardo Silva didn't get to double digits for goals for Man City last season. Ødegaard is probably the best midfielder in the league right now on form. I think he's playing better than De Bruyne right now. I think he's better. I'm trying to think of other teams that have got amazing midfielders. Bruno Fernandes. Bruno Guimaraes is up there playing very well. But I think Martin Odegaard is probably the informed midfielder in the league at this moment in time. I can't think of another midfielder who's better than him right now. He got so much stick. Incredibly so, when we signed him last season. There's a lot of people that have really abused and embarrassed themselves talking about Martin Odegaard, quite frankly. And I am loving every single second of seeing him do so well now. Rancid Pumpkin, the Discord link isn't working. It's probably expired. I'll put a brand new one in there for the members that have joined up after the show. Don't worry. There'll be a new one in there shortly. Ajay says, how much would Nketiah be worth if the continue of the goal scoring goes on? I think he's obviously going to be worth upwards of 20 million easily, maybe towards 30 if he scores. If he scores consistently, you're going to be looking at even more than that. He's got a long-term contract with us. He's a homegrown player, and he's still 23, turning 24 in May. He's going to be worth a significant amount, and it will look much better on Arsenal to have renewed his contract if this form continues. It is great seeing him score. It's great seeing him really kind of silence so many doubters that there were when Nketiah came in. 2 goals in 2 games. We've now got 3 really important games against Newcastle, Spurs, Man United. If he can get on the score sheet in those games, we've got something to really be excited for with Eddie Nketiah. Christopher says, Tom, if we're priced out of a move for Mudryk, who would you consider as an alternative option? I would go to Brighton and say here's 50 million for Mitoma, because I bloody love that kid. I think he's brilliant. I think there is a star in the making in Mitoma. Not sure how old Mitoma is. Have a quick check. Can't be that old. He's 25 years of age. So he's a 4 years or so older than Mudryk. He's actually deceptively older than I thought he was. But I think he's fantastic. I really would. If we can't get Mudryk, I'd be very interested in signing Mitoma. He is a fantastic player. I really think he is very good. People saying that he's too old. 25 is not too old. I don't see people saying that Jesus was too old at 25, to be honest, when we signed him. I think Mitoma in a better team, does even more than he's done so far for Brighton. I think he's been absolutely fantastic this season so far. Should have more goals, should have more assists, but of course he's not been playing regularly. He still only had 490 minutes of football. He's been coming off the bench, of course, for Brighton because they've been playing Trossard on the left-hand side. I think he has been really underused at Brighton. I think he's fantastic. I think he's an absolutely fantastic footballer. I love this. 25-year-old, we're doomed. It's crazy, isn't it, that the perception of ages. I think that there's other players that like Kvaratskhelia at Napoli, of course, is liked by a lot of people. But I really would consider Mitoma as a potential option for Arsenal if we aren't being able to get Mudryk. But hopefully we can go out and get Mudryk. Speaking of a blue whale in the chat, the blue whale, I remember you being one of our biggest Arteta doubters. Has that changed now? Tell me where your head's at. I'm curious. And fair play for you showing up in the chat box, by the way. Whenever I jump onto the Arsenal Lounge, which of course is a very different audience, I notice, of course, that people are disappearing. People have disappeared from chat boxes. I don't know if you've noticed this, maybe because you guys, maybe more than me, are jumping into other YouTube channels and chat boxes. Have you noticed that the people are disappearing from chat boxes that were like really abusive and hating on Arsenal and Arteta? I can't find them. So fair play to Blue Whale in the chat box. Christopher says, Tom, how many of our players would you call world-class and how many are on the verge of being world-class? Great question. Why don't we go through them? Ramsdale, I don't think is a world-class goalkeeper yet. I think he can be. I think Ben White has been world-class this season. I don't think there's too much debate about that. Whether you can describe him as a world-class player yet, I think he needs to do it on a consistent basis. But I think he's definitely, showing world-class performances is Ben White. Saliba, I think, has been, he's a world-class defender. He had an absolute nightmare in the second half yesterday. First half, I thought he was great. Second half, I thought he had an absolute nightmare, did Saliba. But he is a world-class centre-back. There is no doubt about that in my mind. Gabriel, I think, is kind of that level below world class. He's really top quality. I really like Gabriel. I think he needs to become more consistent. I think he needs to eradicate some of the errors from his game, and then we can start talking maybe in his latter 20s about him developing into a world class player. Zinchenko, I think, is a world class player. If he can stay fit, I think he's world class. I think he's absolutely stunning at what he does. and he's perfect for that left-back inverted role that we use him for. Partey is world-class. Granit Xhaka is producing world-class performances as well. You can't be, it's very difficult not to be excited about that. That's going to be really key for us. Martin Odegaard, of course, I think is producing world-class level performances as well. You've got Bukayo Saka that's world-class. You've got Gabriel Jesus that's world-class. You've got Martinelli, who is verging on becoming a world-class player as well. And we've got players, of course, that aren't even getting on the pitch at the moment that are, you could say, have got potential in their future to be world-class too. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can produce with these guys. And I think that we can go forward and fingers crossed anyway, create a team full of players that are world-class. That has got to be the aim between now and the future of this Arsenal Football Club, is producing, buying, developing a squad that is absolutely world-class. Let's scroll down a little bit more. Lynn says, Tom, there is one podcast and you would never think that this show has been an Arteta lover. The bulb has gone. I'm sure there's plenty. Of course, everyone's allowed to have their doubts. If you've never had doubts, it's human. It's very human to have doubts. We've had doubts. There's been times where I thought Arteta should go, and I don't really see how he could continue. How glad I am the club never indulged me in my thoughts with that. But yeah, it's funny. It's funny that people just kind of go off the radar, when things are going well. It is kind of funny. Blue Owl responding says, of course, I've been very vocal about my stance on the manager before. I have a short fuse with the latter Wenger era and Emery era. Yes, I can understand. I think a lot of people have probably been frustrated by what happened. And, I have too. Unai Emery for me was, what really bugs me, is when the period of time where there were people suggesting that Unai Emery was better than Arteta. Despite me at some points thinking maybe Arteta's time at Arsenal might be numbered, especially when we finished 8th and outside of Europe. And, I really couldn't see our way back. And Emery was beating him. Any suggestions that Emery was a better option for us than Arteta? My goodness. I am glad that I never fell into that camp. At least, very glad indeed. Matt G, I'll tell you, one of the funniest lines, and you probably saw this on social media, that again now looks very silly, is the cone man. Do you remember that? Arteta's the guy putting out cones. I saw hundreds of people using that terminology on Arteta. How silly could you look now? Like it's very, very funny. Data for World says, question, Tom, we need to give a lot of praise to Martinelli for that goal on the 71st minute. Imagine if he scored that by Salah or Haaland, everyone would be talking about it. Yeah, I think obviously the Odegaard assist is taking a lot of the praise in that move. Martinelli's run and finish was great. I still think that I still think there's part of me that thinks that he should have squared it to Saka, because I think Sanchez should probably save Martinelli's shot. But yeah, and by the way, I don't know if it was, I think it was a real difference between being in the stadium and watching it on telly, because I thought Martinelli was fantastic. And when I tweeted that out at half time, a lot of people felt that he wasn't having one of his best games. And I thought, sitting in the ground, I was overawed by Martinelli's display. I thought his movement, his passing, his interplay, his running off the last man, the way in which you can watch the kind of game from the whole standing back. And we were right at the back of the Amex Stadium in the kind of the press overflow area. I thought Martinelli was great. And yeah, I had people saying that it wasn't one of his best games. I really liked what I saw from him. I really, really liked what I saw from him. And I very much did enjoy seeing Martinelli roast Lamptey on a number of occasions. There was one moment where Lamptey defended really, really well. Martinelli took a little bit too much time on the left-hand side. Lamptey outstrengthed him, won the ball back. And I think it's actually those moments that can define opinions on halves of players for people. I remember like Gabriel making a mistake. Let's put it this way. If Gabriel does what Saliba does for Brighton's second goal, Gabriel would be crucified, like absolutely crucified for what Saliba did. Now, I think Saliba in the first half was great, fantastic. Really enjoyed what he did. And for me, I just can't not use the line of he is still young. He is going to make mistakes. And ultimately that is going to happen at his age, but he's still learning, he's still improving, and it's why he needs to stay at Arsenal first and foremost, because he's improving all the time. So yeah, I am looking forward to seeing this young team develop, grow, improve, and get better all the time. As I said, we are going to be doing a dedicated podcast looking back at the game against Brighton a little bit later on this afternoon, 5 p.m. UK times. Make sure you set your alarms because we will be doing it at a dedicated show, talking all about Arsenal's 4-2 win. I'll be joined at the moment in time, if they are being punctual and present and don't cancel on me in the last minute, I'll be joined by Drew. It's been a while since Drew's come on the channel, so I'm looking forward to getting Drew's thoughts on things. Mike from the Gooners Pod and Sophie from the Highbury Squad will also be joining me to have a chat about all things Arsenal and Brighton in yesterday's win. We've also got a look ahead, very sharpish, to Newcastle, which is only 2 days away already. That's going to be crazy. As I said, you'll be able to listen, but you'll be able to read my interview with Martin Odegaard after yesterday's game out on Football London later this evening. So make sure you've turned on my Twitter notifications at Tom Canton Media. I post all of my work stuff over there, so you'll be able to get that. It was great speaking to him after the game. It was a packed mix zone, so getting the opportunity to speak and get as many questions in as I did was fantastic. It was great seeing Harry Symeou at the stadium yesterday. I was saying to him, I remember saying, isn't this mad? Like when you think about it, when you think about both me and Harry have done YouTube for a number of years talking about Arsenal, and here we are, sitting in the press lounge and chatting about Arsenal, and then speaking after the games and going in the press conferences and speak. It is mad, and 2022 has been an unbelievable year that has opened up so many opportunities for me. Hoping that 2023 is going to be even better. And I imagine it probably could be if this year is a special one for the club. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. It's been a genuine pleasure, as it always is. And yes, I will speak to you at 5 p.m. today. Have a fantastic one. And as always, up the Arsenal.